welcome the Commissioner and Chief Executive Jim Haylett and Jack Hudson. Could you just remind me of your title?
Yeah, I'm the Head of Business Development.
Thank you. Can I introduce you as well too?
Yeah, Catherine Kimberley, I'm the Communications and Engagement Manager. Hi.
Thank you. So jumping into the agenda, so item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Alex Collis. Does that work? Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. Yes, sorry. Thank you, Chair. So we have apologies from Councillor Alex Collis, Councillor Anna Bradnam, Councillor Claire Daunton, Councillor Simon Bywater, Councillor Ansar Ali and Councillor Steve Tierney. And we also have Councillor Bajent as an attendant, as a substitute for Councillor Alex Collis.
Thank you. Do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest they wish to declare? That is a no. Thank you. So moving on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of February, including the actions. Are there any corrections or amendments anyone wishes to make to the minutes? So is it okay if I sign these as an accurate record of the meeting? I'll take that as a yes. Thank you. And moving on to item 4, we have the Commissioner's response to the panel's recommendations at the last meeting. Commissioner, would you like to introduce this?
Thank you, Chair. So I think we have two here. The response in relation to the precept proposal and the fact that the panel decided not to adopt its veto powers over that, for which I'm grateful and have written to the Chair and the panel accordingly. And then there was the item around the delivery plan moving forward, which was discussed at the last panel, which we've responded to and forms part of the agenda today, Chair. If I may as well, just reflecting back on the minutes, I'm cognizant there were some comments from panel members at the last panel meeting, which I can probably give some clarification to. There is an item that the Councillor Bradnam has raised a few times now around domestic homicide reviews and the funding of them, which currently come from the relevant authorities. I can inform the panel there is currently a Home Office-led review on domestic homicide reviews, which I have been engaged in. Funding isn't actually part of that review, but it was raised, so this is still work in progress. The next item as well, in relation to the funding of the constabulary from core grant from Home Office, the panel will recall that the Chief Constable and I informed you that we were to meet with the Home Office earlier this month, their review team, in relation to that funding. We had a very useful meeting where the Chief Constable and I robustly made the case for Cambridgeshire. Clearly there will be 42 other Chief Constables, Police and Crime Commissioners and Mayors making similar cases across the country, but to inform this panel we made a very robust case. These are early stages, and I think it's fair to say that because there was obviously some conversation around the panel support for that going forward, which I really welcome. I think there's something around timing here, because I think what we need to do as a county, just not just from a policing perspective, but as a county, make the very best case to government, cross-government, not just Home Office, but to Treasury and others. So that will be work we'll be doing clearly with colleagues and partners across the county, keeping this panel informed, so clearly we can progress that and get the very best settlement for the residents of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough that we can. So Chair, forgive me, that was just two clarifications on last meeting that we had.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Do any members have any follow-up questions, clarification on that? No. So the panel is happy to note the Commissioner's response. Yep. Thank you. So moving on to item number 5, public questions. So I believe we have received one question, which Pippa will read out since the questioner is not present today.
Thank you, Chair. So this is from Anthony Carpin, and the question is, following the announcement by the Criminal Bar Association of 13th of March 2022 and their announcement of a no returns policy from 11th of April, and given the issues that they have raised regarding pay and resourcing in the criminal justice system, what assessment has the PCC and his officials made on the potential impact on the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Police and Crime Panel? And it goes on to say, I note the plan states the PCC will work with partners within the criminal justice system to ensure those who break the law are brought to justice efficiently and effectively and are less likely to reoffend. I would be grateful in his response if his response could address this specific point directly, including what actions he proposes taking. And then there is a link to the Criminal Bar Association page.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Anthony Carpenter very much for a very good question. I'm going to read out the written response, which will be sent to Anthony Carpenter, and the Commissioner may wish to expand on it. So the written response is, within Cambridgeshire we have excellent working relationships amongst the different criminal justice agencies. The Commissioner chairs the local Criminal Justice Board that oversees joint working arrangements and ensures that where there are local problems and issues that they are swiftly resolved. We know that the restrictions brought on due to COVID have impacted on backlogs in the court system, and this is something that we as a board have been working to mitigate as far as possible. In that context, any disruption in our ability for trials to progress would be regrettable. Although this is a national matter of which the Commissioner has no direct control, the Commissioner has already discussed this with the government at ministerial level, and the Commissioner would hope that this matter is resolved, as the Commissioner's concern is about local justice proceeding and providing a service to victims and witnesses. So thank you. Over to you, Commissioner.
So Chair, as you rightly said, that is a good question. Because this issue does, pose a significant risk, and the risk is that victims and witnesses will have to wait longer, potentially for trials. We've already got backlogs due to pandemic, and of course, those awaiting trial will have to wait. As we said in my written response, actually following this announcement on the 13th of March, I was with the Policing Minister. It's very much on their radar and across to the Ministry of Justice as well. So I'm confident that those conversations with the Bar are still proceeding at pace. In addition, I can inform the panel for some reassurance that the efficiency group of the Criminal Justice Board for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which I chair, is meeting this afternoon. The main agenda item is in relation to mitigation on this particular item. So very much aware of it. We will continue to do exactly everything we can do, particularly around mitigation. I'm rather hoping it will be resolved prior to the April days, and we get business back to usual, trying to get these backlogs down and get justice for all of our residents.
Thank you. Do any members have any follow-up questions on that? Okay, well, thank you very much for providing that answer, Commissioner. So moving on to item 6, review of complaints. I can confirm that on the date that this agenda was published, which was the 15th of March, there had been no complaints received since the last report. Therefore, the panel happy to note the report as provided. Thank you. So moving on to item 7, which is the first substantive report. This is on the Commissioner's approach to communications and engagement. Commissioner, would you like to introduce this report?
Thank you, Chair. And I will hand over to Catherine shortly, but hopefully this panel will be aware communications and engagement are important to me. I spend a significant amount of time in relation particularly to the engagement piece and indeed the communications, both holding a significant amount of roundtable events, particularly with councillors of all types, be it parish, town, etc. Then with local communities, and obviously quite a lot of media, both with local radio, television, and press as well. But I would actually like to point out a highlight of my past 2 weeks. Another one of my roles is that I am the National Association of Police and Crime Commissioners Forensics Lead, which is a really important and significant area, one that challenges policing, and if forensics fall, the criminal justice system would fall. And it happened to be National Science Week last week, so I was very grateful that one of our scenes of crimes officers joined me in visiting universities and schools across the county, delivering presentations on science and wider policing, and spent the morning at Camborne Primary School. And I give this as an example because that was the highlight of my week. Year 5 and 6 is giving us great input into the world of forensics. So that's just an overview. Very, very keen to progress in this area, and I'm grateful as well for the panel's support in this. I know that conversations have been had with my communications team, particularly on the area of reach, and particularly those hard to reach groups. I noticed I was at the AGM of our scrutiny panel for stop and search and use of force yesterday evening, and this is something we put in place in relation to the scrutiny of those two significant areas. I'm particularly proud that that's up and running with some great volunteers from across our communities, on account of the fact we've had a government response to a race and inclusion report recently saying that all force areas must have this in by next year. Well, we have it in, and we have it in now, and they're really effective, and some of the recommendations that they've made to the constabulary have already been taken on board, which have really led to some positive outcomes for our communities as well. But I must say, one area that they're struggling with as well, although it's a broad and good diverse mix of people we have, but it's actually still getting those harder to reach communities, and I think that's where we need to do more work. I recall Councillor Collis asking me at the last meeting to meet with the Romani Gypsy community. That's in train, and I think we've arranged that, so I'm all really grateful for any recommendations, assistance this panel, anyone can give me. But Catherine, is there anything you would like to add to the paper put before this panel?
I would just like to thank the support that we've received to date. I think Darryl is right in that one of the areas we're hoping to increase our activity is with the hard-to-reach communities. We've made some inroads in that with specific and targeted communications, but there's always more that can be done. So one of the things we are trialling at the moment is looking at an ongoing survey on our website, which allows everybody to feedback throughout the year and just not on specific target issues. So, I mean, I'm assuming that everyone has read the paper. It would be helpful if you just wanted to address any questions to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner and Catherine. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Ferguson.
So thank you very much for that, and I can say that I've noticed your face-to-face engagement. I met you last week, and I met you several times in St Neots, and that's definitely been recognised. I think you've just touched on this, and I was very relieved to hear about you visiting primary schools. But I've mentioned this before, but when you did your police and crime plan consultation, we only had 6 people aged 18 to 24 responding, and I guess that's one of those hard-to-reach demographics. I wondered if you had any plans on how you were going to better engage with that demographic and all of those hard-to-reach demographics, because for me that's a key problem. And I understand it's a problem for anybody involved in public life and communication, so it's not only shared by you.
Thank you, Councillor. And you're absolutely right. The issue I think we had before, if we put out surveys, it's a certain demographic that will tend to take the time to fill them in. And I don't think it should be that difficult to reach those, particularly younger people. I don't think they should be that hard to reach. So, I mean, the comms team and I, we are working through plans in relation to that. Obviously, reaching out, we're now getting into far more schools and universities because we can. We haven't been able to for the past year. And also, I've attended a few events of the Cambridge Youth Advisory panel, did a question time slot with them. But I know that, and I'm grateful to Catherine and the team, because rather than I think the plan moving forward is, rather than wait to a time when, by statutory responsibilities we have to consult maybe around, precept funding, etc. This should be an ongoing thing across the year, not just a month before any particular issue. So we have plans in place for that. Catherine, do you want to just inform the panel of that?
If I may, Chair, as well, it's about using different tactics with different groups. So we all know that filling in a precept survey about the council tax to a lot of young people that are still living at home with their parents is not going to happen. However, there are different formats we can use. So we're looking more at digital media. We're looking at opportunities where we can present to schools and different groups in the communities, disabled groups, young people's representatives like Voiceability. So we've got connections in there, so we can basically get their feedback but get it on the level that they want to give it. So it might be face to face, it might be done on a Teams meeting, on a remote. We've done quite a few of these. We hold evening events where people can get to, so it's more accessible. So every day we're just trying to think of more tactical plans, more targeted activity. And I think the example that Daryl's just given about the forensics, the tactic of going in and showing young people how forensics works, gains that interest in the whole police world, gains their interest in understanding what Daryl's role is. And we've had some really nice feedback about that particular aspect. So more of that we'd like to see.
Thank you. Any other members have any questions? Councillor Job.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very small point. Just really to thank, and I've had some good feedback from the farming community about the engagement that you've made with them, because certainly my patch is a very rural area, and there is a lot of rural crime, and obviously there's a lot of illegal hare coursing, certainly within East Cambridgeshire, out towards the fens. So it's good to see, and so the feedback I've had is very, very positive.
I wanted to just ask a couple of questions. So around the ECOPs, now this, which I'm not sure why it's still called ECOPs, because I think actually to the public it's Neighbourhood Alert. But I just wonder what your strategy was for expanding that mailing list, because obviously that's quite a key communication channel. And what sort of what analysis you have on the geographical and social reach of that, and also how that breaks down, and if you've been able to identify particular communities to target for that, in order just to kind of open that regular communication channel.
I'm happy just to take a couple of those points in the first place before handing over to Catherine. I think we could make the assumption in relation to ECOPs. Once again, although it has a fairly big following, it will, I would imagine, be a certain demographic that we capture often in those other surveys as well. Moving forward, now, having spoken to Catherine, the team are getting more training on the digital media platforms, particularly things like Facebook, because you asked one question about sort of targeting, and actually there are certain tools with these social media, particularly Facebook, around really drilling down specific targeting, often at very low cost, and given that this is a statutory responsibility, that's one that I've asked Catherine to progress, and I know that she is doing just that. But Catherine, do you want to add any more?
Yes, thank you, Chair. One of the things we're looking at the moment is, as Daryl said, the traditional uptake of Neighbourhood Alert has been a specific demographic, and despite ongoing campaigns, we find it really difficult to get the younger age group and some of the diverse communities interested in that. So our plan at the moment is to actually go out to them and have face-to-face meetings with groups and ask about the format that they would prefer to receive updates in. We're looking at a piece of software which is more of an e-newsletter, which we can then spread out to our stakeholders and local councillors. Of course, there's 600-700 of those, so we can go through the sort of community groups in neighbourhoods rather than just relying on the 20,000 people that have signed up to ECOPs. There does seem to be a shift away from that at the moment, speaking to colleagues in other OPCCs, that people just want to get their news digitally. So if we can develop this e-newsletter idea, that would give us, a monthly opportunity to update people on the various progress against the plan, including things like recruitment, updates on officer numbers, and also looking at things like recruiting volunteers. So another piece of engagement ongoing at the moment, looking at trying to get more diverse people into the scrutiny panel, into the independent custody visitor scheme, and these are all different sort of strands of our tactical attack, if you like, of trying to expand on that reach, as well as looking at Facebook as well. Thank you, Chair.
And Chair, if I may just directly, in relation to Councillor Sharp's comments there on rural crime, I mean, that is significant in our county. 90% of our county is rural. We have communities in our rural areas who often feel isolated and often feel they don't get the response. And of course, it's a massive impact on our economy. It feeds our economy, a lot of our rural businesses. The good news here is that rural crime is down, hair coursing down 50%, because we have an excellent rural crime team here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, second to none. They are the envy of other forces, and I'm really pleased. I mean, I've been part of a lobbying group along with our members of Parliament, all of our members of Parliament, in fact, in relation to hair coursing, and we're going to see new legislation increasing fines and giving police more powers, which is exactly what the police wanted, and it's exactly what our rural community wanted, and I'm really pleased to be able to say that that will now happen.
Excellent, thank you. I also wanted to ask about you mentioned having one-to-one calls with local residents when requested. Now, it may be that you're able to have a one-to-one call with everyone who requests, but I imagine that there must be times where you have more requests than you can handle. I just wondered, what process do you have to kind of triage those requests?
I don't do a lot of triage. In fact, I have serviced practically every one of those requests. There have been one or two on advice of my monitoring officer and the force that we have not engaged with, and some by risk assessment. But to date, I've engaged with everybody. Ultimately, I can spare 10 minutes on a phone call, and longer if necessary, to everybody who's asked. So, it could be following this panel and getting out that there are more requests, and then we'd have to put a process in place. At the moment, there is no process. If someone wants to talk to me, they get to talk to me, unless there's a very good reason why not.
That's a good message to get out. Councillor Hogg.
So I just wanted to return back to the ECOPS newsletter. You say that there's been a decline. Is that a decline in people sort of unsubscribing? I mean, do you monitor the open rates, the click rates, that kind of aspect of the newsletter?
Darryl, do you want me to take that one? So yes, so we do monitor. We haven't had a decline in our numbers, in effect, but because we've changed our approach to engagement to a blended approach, so we don't put everything out by ECOPS anymore. We're using all of the channels, the digital channels available to us, and I think that this is sort of anecdotal from other OPCCs. Somebody's already mentioned about it being called ECOPS. People very much see it as a police-led neighbourhood alert, because we used to be tied in with the same licence. We now have a separate one, so we're looking at rebranding, and part of that will be putting out this e-newsletter to all of those ECOPS members, if you like. So it's looking at a blended approach which actually reach more of the community than we currently do.
Okay, but are you monitoring how the things like click rates and open rates to see if what works, what doesn't work, and then adjusting it accordingly?
Yes, we do that. We don't get a lot of responses. To be fair, most of the open responses we had are usually quite full of praise for the activity we've taken out. I can recall maybe a couple of situations over the last year where there's been some negativity, but we've had no one unsubscribing. That's quite good.
Any other members have questions on this? So you're happy for us to note that report? Thank you. So then moving on to the next item, which is the Commissioner's approach to complaints and conduct. Commissioner, would you like to introduce this report?
Thank you, Chair. So, complaints and conduct. I think it's fair to say this is a fairly complex landscape in relation to policing. There is legislation and statutory guidance, and of course along come police and crime commissioners, and that adds another dimension, and I think it was a couple of years ago now, following consultation, police and crime commissioners were able to opt in or out of a number of options of how they would want to be involved in the oversight of police conduct and complaints. My predecessor chose, I think, what was then called option 1, which is still in place now. Just to summarise this, Jack has obviously attended today, and he can answer any more detailed and technical questions, but just to give an oversight, and it's actually helpful for me sometimes just to summarise how conduct and complaints work within policing. There are various different levels, and probably the bottom level is around complaint resolution, where it doesn't formally become a complaint, but there is some resolution to a concern given by a member of the public. For me, that's really important. I know operational, and one for the Chief Constable. I am pleased that he has put in place a complaints resolution team. So these are a team of staff who make contact with those who feel that they haven't received the service that they would have expected, to try and resolve it. Because actually we don't want complaints. I don't want complaints, because I want people to get the very best possible service. So it's resolving it in the first place. If of course that isn't able to be done, and a complaint comes in, then you have the professional standards departments, which each force will have. We collaborate with Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire, but ultimately kind of irrelevant, because it's for me it's the Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire that will be held to account for the delivery of that service. What I can say, and you recall when the Chief Constable was here last time, obviously the police uplift, great news, more police officers, but we must ensure as well that wraparound, and that will include our professional standards as well. So there is more investment going into the professional standards department. So they will take on certain complaints, but also there's the independent office of police complaints, independent of policing. Some of the more serious matters will be referred to those, and they will deal with them as well. Where my office comes in is when PSD, our local professional standards, have come to the conclusion of a complaint, and the complainant is not content and asks for a review, and my office will conduct that review. Fair to say we're not necessarily reviewing the actual conduct, it's reviewing the process and procedure of what has taken place. So fairly complex, and behind that, as you can imagine, there are pages and pages of legislation and guidance. Now, what I can say, Chair, because it is a complex area, and I might ask how an Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner is necessarily equipped and skilled to carry out this task. Bear in mind that each and every one is around the country. Where I do have some reassurance that Jack, fairly new to our team, his background is with the Independent Office of Police Complaints, so has a very good knowledge around the technical aspects, and I'll spare Jim his blushes, but I know that Jim has a very sound background in professional standards as well. So between us there's some expertise, but I'm very clear on what my role is. It's not the police aspect. You know, professional standards are part of policing. IOPC is independent. My role is very clear about holding the constabulary to account, and therefore those complaints that we receive are reviewed on that basis. There is far more technical detail and some numbers in the paper that was presented as well, as to how many reviews that we've taken, how many we've upheld and not. But very happy for any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Members, do you have any questions on this item? Claire?
Oh yeah, I'm not very good at. I'm non-technical, clearly. I just want to ask a question, please, around your two ethical policing panels, and it's really interesting to hear you talk very positively around the stop and search panel. But I wonder, given that in part, the purpose of those ethical policing panels is to build public confidence in policing. What outcomes from those two panels and activities are in the public domain?
Thank you, Kaz. That's a great question, because that came up yesterday again. There's, you know, that ultimately this is about that reassurance and confidence. A lot of it is about learning lessons. But you're quite right. Actually, so far, and I will look to Jim to give the technical detail if I mislead, but it's all posted on the constabulary website. Because although they are, you know, those panels ultimately are directed by my office, it's actually a joint collaboration with the constabulary. It has to be. So it is published on constabulary website. As was pointed out to me by the chair of the panels, it isn't as yet on the PCC website, which needs to be addressed pretty quickly. I believe there's a technical issue because we're changing, but that's not good enough. We do need to get it out there. You're quite right. So completely on my radar. It is on the constabulary website, but we need to be putting more out. And I know that that the panel itself, the scrutiny panel, is very keen to get more comms out as well. And I think we should be, because they're doing some really good stuff, really good reassurance.
Thank you. Any other members? I wanted to ask a question about the paragraph 5.1, that the IOPC oversees the police complaint system, they independently investigate the most serious and sensitive matters, albeit Cambridge's Professional Standards Department do deal with some of these. Now, my question is, what is the process for making a decision for referral? And is the referral, so that clearly there are going to be cases in a grey zone, and are those all referred to the IOPC, and then some of them are sort of bounced back to the PSD, and you as Commissioner, do you have oversight of that? Or is there actually an internal decision-making process that actually keeps some of those more sensitive cases to be investigated in-house, if you like, and not referred to the IOPC? And in which case, are you satisfied that that decision-making process is robust?
Thank you, Chair. I do know the answer, but I want the absolute technical answer given by my colleague, Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In understanding your question, the complaints, there is a set criteria by which need to be referred to the IOPC and which need to be investigated locally. And that criteria is outlined in statutory guidance as to what they have. So, for example, death or serious injury all need to be sent to the IOPC initially for their oversight, and then they would send it back. So I hope that answers the first question around what is required to be sent. In relation to oversight, then we have the PSD, or the Professional Standards Department Governance Board, where we get notified of all the complaints that's been received. We get an element of a confidential brief as well around that, around what are currently the themes and the issues, and we monitor progress around those complaints on a quarterly basis. In addition, from the IOPC, there are regular meetings with the IOPC at a practitioner's level, as well as with the Commissioner around the complaints and ongoing complaints and the progress of those complaints. We don't make any decisions around actual complaints, because that is actually PSD's department's area of responsibility. It's not ours.
Thank you. The bit that I'm most interested in is this description of complaints that are in the serious and sensitive category that are still being investigated by the PSD. So clearly there are some objective criteria, but there will necessarily be some subjective criteria in that decision process. So it's really trying to understand whether those sensitive cases that are being investigated by the PSD, that you're satisfied that is always appropriate, that it's not being referred, or it is being referred and being referred back.
So when they talk about the sensitive ones, they're actually talking about ones that are probably in the public interest, high public interest, and they would be taken on by the IOPC, but they're always referred into the IOPC. If they think that this is a really sensitive issue, they would take on the investigation, or they would then refer it back to PSD for investigation, depending on the level of the issue. And obviously they're looking at the more complex, sensitive matters that are in the public interest. They would take on those investigations.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yes, Commissioner.
So Chair, and this is the way that I've found it work. Often, certain complaints will be referred to the IOPC, and they will make a decision and will put it back to the constabulary to investigate. But perhaps to put some context to this around sort of sensitive issues, we saw quite shocking details around a case in the Metropolitan Police student Q and the stop and search. So, for example, in itself, as a stop and search, there's an argument that's not a serious thing to investigate, and that would be for local. But given the very serious public and community concern, that may be the very sort of thing that the IOPC would rightly take on, given the criticalness and the community concerns that would be around it as well. So sometimes there is professional judgment as well as that technical criteria that Jack has described there as well.
So, I mean, just to really be absolutely clear about this, the decision to refer to the IOPC is made by officers in the constabulary. I mean, the IOPC doesn't, read the newspapers and to say, you need to be referring this to us. So the question really is, you as Commissioner, are you satisfied that that decision is always a sound decision?
That forms part of the briefing we have with PSD. And ultimately, the referral was made by the Chief Constable. So that's part of the process that we have in relation to holding the Chief Constable to account, go through those cases as well. So I am confident, but it's a very good point you make, and I will leave this panel and ensure that everything is in place once again in relation to that referral process onto the IOPC.
Thank you. That would be reassuring. Councillor Hogg.
Just a quick question for clarification, I suppose, really. You say that a number of these cases are sent to the IOPC, and they then look at them and then go, these ones we'll take forward, but these you can have back because we don't feel that they're necessary for us to look at. What kind of percentage are we talking about in terms of the ones that are returned? Can you give a feel on that? I mean, it doesn't have to be precisely down to 63%, but is it...
I wouldn't like to give a percentage on the whole issue, but the majority are returned to professional. The majority are returned to professional standards.
So it's a significant number, is the point.
That's correct.
Okay.
Jim. Yep.
Just to try and add a little bit more clarity. So, when they get returned for PSD to investigate, the IOPC will still have a role of oversight of those cases as well. So part in the paper talks about, and the Commissioner has referred to, the review process of complaints. So if a complaint is made, for example, an officer was rude to somebody, that would be inevitably, I think, dealt with locally by PSD and wouldn't be referred to the IOPC. If at the end of that complaint investigation or the process of dealing with that complaint, the member of the public is not happy with the outcome, that's when they can ask the OPCC to review to see whether it was a reasonable and proportionate outcome. If, however, it's a more serious matter, for instance, that was referred to the IOPC and then sent back for PSD to investigate, if at the end of that the member of the public is not happy, the appropriate review body for that is the IOPC. So, as I say, there are an awful lot of checks and balances from the IOPC side of things in terms of that broader complaints process. It's not just a case that we refer, or PSD refer a serious matter, and if the IOPC don't take it, then it's all then dealt with within force, because they will have some oversight then.
Thank you very much. That was useful clarification. I have a further question on the paragraph 5.13, which is about the whistleblowing standards, professional standards reporting concerning whistleblowing. Now, whistleblowing policies are all, they can look good on paper, but the realities for people can make it very difficult for them to use them. So I'm very interested in preventative policies that avoid the need for someone to be a whistleblower. And I just wondered whether, Commissioner, you were aware of the EPIC programme, which it stands for. I'll just remind myself what it stands for. It's the Ethical Policing is Courageous. It started in New Orleans Police Department, and it is essentially a peer intervention training programme with the idea that it empowers officers and staff to step in when they see that a colleague is possibly going to make a mistake. In other words, they avoid the situation arising in the first place. And in fact, if I can just quote to you what EPIC says, which I think it encapsulates it quite nicely. It's a peer intervention program developed by the New Orleans Police Department in collaboration with community partners to promote a culture of high quality and ethical policing. EPIC educates, empowers and supports the officers on the streets to play a meaningful role in policing one another. It's a program that teaches officers how to intervene to stop a wrongful action before it occurs. At its core, EPIC is an officer survival program, a community safety program and a job satisfaction program. EPIC represents a cultural change in policing that equips, encourages and supports officers to intervene to prevent misconduct and ensure high quality policing. Everyone benefits when potential misconduct is not perpetrated or when a potential mistake is not made. And I think that puts very powerfully what that programme is trying to achieve. And certainly I think we've seen that the Met could perhaps do with having some of that. And I just wonder what whether you have any thoughts about the role of that within Cambridgeshire.
Chair, I haven't heard of that particular programme, but I'm very happy to have a look at that. And as you rightly say, policing's been put in the spotlight once again. Recently we've had the student coup, and we've had some further reports around misogyny within policing, and this will only go to dent the confidence of the general public in our policing. Ethical policing, as you know, forms a key pillar. It's a priority for me. It's a priority for the Chief Constable, but we can't just keep talking about it, and I think we do need cultural change. Certainly I'm in conversations with other police and crime commissioners as well in relation to this point. So I think for me, I'll certainly take that away and look at it. I think not for me to say now, because there's some work going on certainly with police and crime commissioners in moving forward, given our role quite distinctly about holding to account for the effective and efficient. Well, a police force anywhere in the country can't be effective and efficient if it has some of the cultural issues that we're seeing. But having said that, I would like to just finish on this. I firmly believe, but by far the greatest proportion and significant majority of our police officers and staff are ethical and go about doing their job to their very highest ethical standards. It's where that's fading down. We need to, and we absolutely need to prioritise in sorting some of those issues out. It's on the national agenda. It's certainly on the Chief Constable's agenda here in Cambridgeshire, and certainly on mine as well. And I'd be very happy to take away the EPIC programme and have a look at that, Chair.
Thank you. And my final question on this paper was on 5.16. This is about the community scrutiny panels. That the scrutiny panels are chaired by an independent volunteer who is responsible for selecting incidents for scrutiny and conducting the panel meetings. I just particularly want to focus on that selecting incidents. Do you know what the process is for doing that and what information they're provided in order to help them make that decision about which cases to choose?
I was going to say I was at the AGM yesterday and they went through this, so I do know. But but Jack's been working so hard with the scrutiny panel. I think it would be wrong of me to steal your thunder, Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair. The process, the Chair actually goes to the constabulary and looks through their to-serve, which is their system where they're recorded of all the stop and search, use of force. They look through that, and the Chair actually looks at the ones in the past month and then identifies which one they would like to see in relation to it. And they do that before they establish whether there was body-worn video or not. So they look at the case, and they look at the grounds, they look at then the body-worn video, and they put all that together. So the Chair actually selects 9 to 10 for review at a panel. The constabulary then respond by either saying there is body-worn video available or not. A development of that has been that they will just review the grounds of the search, for example, in the first instance, even if there's no body-worn video, but the panel likes to review approximately 3 body-worn video examples per scrutiny meeting. And that might not sound a lot, but actually if you're talking about an engagement where you're carrying out a search, you could be talking about 30 minutes per body-worn video of the search. It's that. So it is really down to the independent chair working with the panel and personally selecting which ones they would like to look at. And they tend to go for a theme, potentially drugs, potentially other aspects. So they'll pick a theme and say, I'd like that, and they look at that. So it is independent.
Thank you. That's very useful to know. Claire George, yes?
Sorry, can I just also, if they pick 10, roughly, very roughly, what sort of proportion would that be of the stop and searches in that month, ish?
Usually around 200 to 300
Okay.
stop and search. So it gives you an idea. But they are randomly selected, so roughly around that number.
Thank you.
Do members have any other questions on this report? Are you happy to note it? Okay, thank you. So moving on to item 9, which is the delivery of the police and crime plan, the forward plan. Thank you, Commissioner, for providing this as requested. My first observation is that the totality of all the deliverables looks like an extremely ambitious plan for the next 6 to 9 months. So I wish you well with that. I think what we would like to do is perhaps just touch on some of these issues, really just to flag them up for deeper scrutiny, either at the annual general meeting in July or in the meeting in September, where we've picked criminal justice and communities as the two main areas to focus. So I think what I'd like is for this discussion to kind of help guide you in terms of where, so programming the briefing for the panel before those meetings and giving you a bit of a steer on the areas that we want to investigate in more detail. So do you want to introduce this paper first?
Thank you, Chair. So I was very keen, and on previous conversations at previous panels, this is a result of some of those conversations. This is the forward plan, and behind this there's far more detail in relation to the delivery plan of what we're looking to achieve, certainly within the next year or 9 months. Ambitious? Well, yes, it is ambitious. Achievable? Yes, it is achievable. Not least of which, and cards on the table, it won't all be finished, it won't be all sorted. If we can sort out the drugs issues in Cambridgeshire in a year, that would be fantastic. It's not going to happen, we know that, but we're going to work very hard with partners. But just on that point, some of the items in here will be work in train regardless of whether they're in a delivery plan or not. So for example, some of the work we talk around drugs, well, we have a drug strategy from government. We have the national policing crime measures that we need to work through. We're going to see legislation around reducing serious violence placed on local authority and partners. So this is all stuff we need to be doing. And yes, ambitious, but I won't be doing this alone, supported by the Constabulary and partners. And I very much see, the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner is convening, those partners to ensure that we get the best outcomes in relation to some of these strands. So hopefully, Chair, this gives the panel an insight into some of the work that we're doing in the office and where we want to be in 9 months to a year, and very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So I suggest what we go through theme by theme, and the purpose of this is really for the panel to sort of air their areas of concern or interest. We're not expecting detailed answers from your Commissioner today, but we would obviously like to explore those areas in more detail at one of the next panel meetings. So, Councillor, so starting with putting communities first, that theme, is that Councillor Hogg?
Thank you, Chair, for you. So before I come to the question, I have to say I do welcome the aspect of a briefing pack regarding the workings of the CSPs for the benefit of councillors, for the swift referral and resolution of community concerns. Peterborough seems to want to be a little bit different and call their CSP something completely different to everybody else in the county. It's a safer Peterborough partnership. There seems to be very little information out there about what it does, who's on it. I think there are, in terms of members of the public knowing what it does and how it does its work, is bad enough. But I think there's quite a percentage of councillors that have absolutely no idea what it does and how it's achieved. And I note that the last time I looked at the website that concerns that there was a priorities on there that was out of date, and that seems to have now disappeared and hasn't been replaced. So that there's clearly some work that needs to be done on that. And I realise that's not all down to yourself. There are other members of that panel that need to come together to get some action on this. But my question is that it is not so much what is before me, but what isn't there. It says quite clearly here that we will ensure that police and other partners are listening to the public and working with them to act on their concerns and support them to assist themselves. I have grave concerns over the 101 service. Time and time again, we get pushback from police officers, senior police officers, that the reason why there hasn't been a response to something is that there wasn't enough calls to service. And this is a chicken and egg situation where, because people are ringing in and not getting a response or being held on the phone, those calls to service are not happening, and they've given up essentially on that service. We're supposed to be a data-led police service. If we're not getting the data in at the top end of the sausage factory, it's going to be a very poor result coming out the other end. I also note that the website for web chat, they've now changed how that looks on the web page. If you go onto the web page, the web chat is basically a small circle in the bottom right-hand corner with what looks like an envelope and 3 dots. That does not say this is the place to click to be able to talk to somebody. What was there before was much more obvious and much more in your face, so that people would go to it. It almost seems like it's a concerted effort to try and quietly take that away to one side so that we don't have to deal with, and I realise that's not the case, but that's what I'm being told by residents in my ward and across the city. It's not just myself that's getting this pushback. So, whilst this list of deliverables does look really good, I really do. We need to go back to basics, and those basics is if we're really talking about listening to public and working with them to act on their concerns, the first thing is let's pick up the bloody phone and let's talk to these people and not leave them hanging on.
I agree with you. And that's what I hear from residents as well. And I suspect, because obviously I will challenge the Chief Constable, and there is work going on within what they call the demand hub, where the 101 service and other services, and they've recruited more staff into there as well. And of course the constabulary can give figures around pick-up times, which are completely within the bounds of acceptability, but I hear this time and time again from residents. And I suspect it's a mixture. It's a mixture of you know, lived experience of ringing 101, or, and just as damaging, that perception, because someone said don't bother ringing 101 as well. So clearly there needs to be more work in this area. That is certainly something I'm holding the Chief Constable to account for. You can rest assured, you know, the whole contacting the police and the police responding is a key component to the plan. It's got to be. And I will continue. I will take away that specific issue around the web chat. I will take that feedback back straight away. I just, and once again, this probably hasn't been communicated well, particularly when it comes to elected representatives or community leaders, like most of yourselves. We found one of the concerns and complaints, if you like, was, well, other than ringing 101, how do we contact the police? It's not an emergency. We don't want to report a crime, but we have a community issue, and in particularly councillors, because you're out there talking to your residents all the time. How do we, you know, speak to someone and express that concern and get those over to the police and that intelligence? And up until a few months ago, there was no other way than either ringing 101, or you might know who your local police officer is and you might have their phone number, but that to me wasn't good enough as a process. There is now a mechanism to report to your local policing team. If you don't have that, I will get it to you, but that's proven quite effective, because you can report areas of concern, you know, so whether that be in Peterborough, St Neots, you know, you have this issue with use in this area, the local policing team do pick that up, and it forms an intelligence picture of, and then it will, and I've seen evidence they will deploy to deal with that. So that's one good thing that's happened recently. But I completely take on board your issue about 101, and I will continue to hold the Chief Constable to account, and I will come back to this panel and inform you of where we are with that.
Just come back on that. So yes, so going back to your neighbourhood policing teams, I categorically think that the decision that was made, not by yourself but by the police, by the Chief Constable, to reduce the numbers of PCSOs was a strategically poor decision. What we did was, in a stroke of a pen, we immediately got rid of years of integration in our communities and replace them with. So I kind of get the idea that, you know, having a warranted officer that does provide the Chief Constable with more options as to how to move them about, and you know, they've got greater powers, etc. But we had PCSOs with years of experience in depth embedded in the community, and it immediately cut off that supply of information, where people didn't want to ring in, they didn't want to report a crime, but they wanted to have a conversation with somebody that they knew and trusted in an anonymous way, so that they weren't kind of directly involved. And what we've replaced that with are yes, younger police officers that probably towards the early part of their career, and they're going to be moving on to other areas. So what we're going to lose is this investment in the community. I brought this up before, and I'm sure I'll be bringing it up again, because, you know, back in the day, neighbourhood policing used to be sort of older police officers that not going out to grass, but people that had a long career that were looking for a more stable working arrangement for their families, etc. And so they had huge knowledge of what the police was about, and they were in depth into their communities. I feel that we've kind of flipped that on the head, and I'm not entirely sure that it's working because of that churn of police officers.
Thank you, Councillor. Those concerns I absolutely recognise. You know, I hear it from our communities and share some. There's a lot I could say, but I would be diving into the operational. Clearly those are decisions for the Chief Constable. However, part of the plan, we talked about local neighbourhood policing. So it's a move away who does that, whether that's a PCA warranted police officer, neighbourhood local policing. The Chief Constable has committed to, and we are now seeing it as well, bolstering our neighbourhood policing teams. And that is happening. I've been out, we have got more police officers in our local policing teams tackling local issues and crime. I accept what you're saying, it's an operational decision. A counter argument will be, well actually, crime is down. It is down in most areas, particularly those neighbourhood crimes. And there is a school of thought and some academic research around, well actually it should be intelligence-led hotspot policing. But for me, the important thing is that investment in local policing and neighbourhood policing. Clearly a matter for the Chief Constable how he decides to go about that. But I will certainly hold him to his word of bolstering those neighbourhood policing teams. Just one, although operational, but just one matter there around the PCSOs. I completely agree. We have some excellent PCSOs who do some excellent work in our communities. I'm aware a number of those because a number of those obviously lost their jobs, but they applied to become warranted officers. They were successful. I think you heard the Chief last time, a commitment to put them back into those neighbourhoods that they came from, and that is happening. So that's a good thing, but it doesn't, it doesn't take away from some areas have lost, PCSOs that knew that area very well and was that face of policing to our local communities.
Just on that topic, I wanted to pass on a comment or a question from Councillor Daunton, who couldn't be here today. And I think her perspective is that although neighbourhood policing may be improving in some areas, I think she was feeling that in South Cambridgeshire she's not seeing that level of improvement, and was really keen to understand how you are monitoring the effectiveness of the neighbourhood policing, delivery of the neighbourhood policing plan, to make sure that it is living up to the Chief Constable's promises on delivering good, effective neighbourhood policing.
So, thank you, Chair. And I'm aware, that at any one time, there will be, certain communities who feel that they're not getting their fair share in relation to policing. And particularly that local neighbourhood policing. The reality is, I've seen the figures, far more police officers have gone into local neighbourhood policing teams. So that's part of my holding to account for our business board with the Chief Constable. The outcomes, well, where you see the outcomes is in relation to those measures around, crime rates, around attendance rates to incidents. And, they are part of that holding to account. The other thing I might say is we talked about community safety partnerships, or the Peterborough Safer Partnership as it in Peterborough. These aren't standalone sort of organisations. They're not. That's a statutory partnership, and I know that Councillor Dawson actually sits as Vice Chair on the South Cams. I am very keen. It's in the Police and Crime Plan. And it's legislation as well in relation to those CSPs that I support and help them move forward. So if you have those local issues and local concerns, obviously if it's a policing matter there and then, the police are the right people to go to. But if it's more of a wider issue, and there are very few issues, and I think we'll probably all agree, that any one agency or the police can deal with alone, whether it's antisocial behaviour, whether it's drugs, it's always going to be a joined up multi-agency whole system approach. It might be the police do the heavy lifting, or it might be the local authority. But for me, it's where those CSPs come together with their statutory hat on. And I'm very keen to support that. And I will be encouraging the leaders of those statutory partners, be it the Chief Constable, Chief Fire Officer, local leaders, Chief Executives, to follow me in the support of CSPs moving forward. And how that comes back directly to your question around South Cambridge. Well, I know that South Cambridge have received more police officers. I know that for a fact. But it's how they're being deployed and how they're seen to be deployed by local communities. And I want the CSPs being part of that, and that's where people, once they have those issues, they should be picked up by the CSPs, and then the statutory partners do some work around it as well. So that's part of the deliverable. That's part of a key policy in my police and crime plan. I'm happy to say that the South Cambridgeshire CSP, chaired by a chief fire officer, I spoke with them recently, and I know that they're very excited to move on with some of this. So hopefully Councillor Daunton and others will see some improvements moving forward.
Yes, that would be good. I wanted to get some idea about the timescale for this work on the CSPs. I mean, is it something that by September you would expect sort of the new structure and communication strategies and so on to be embedded and to be able to report on them to the panel?
So where we are at the moment, we have already obviously engaged with all the CSPs. There's funding available to them to take on a problem-solving post. It's really good news. 4 of the 6 have started that process now. The other 2 say they already have that in place. And then we had the community fund behind that to support that. So I can come back with more detail certainly at the September as to what we've done in relation to CSPs, because we're practically at the point now they are recruiting resource. We've agreed some proposals and some fundamental principles moving forward. So we can certainly give an update, and hopefully we'll start to see some positive results of this as well. I do use, Chair, if I may, I do use the phraseology here. It's evolution rather than revolution. This is working with our partners. We all need to go on this journey together or it won't work. But I'm confident that we will get there, and we've got some really good buy-in at the moment from our partners. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to come back here in September and give some positive news.
Okay, thank you. And on the particularly on to 101, both the analysis of the effectiveness of communication to the constabulary, but also this issue that we keep raising about feedback to people who report, that if that so many people feel that nothing happens because they get no feedback, and that actually then puts them off, and it means that they tell other people not to bother because it's don't waste your time. So I think we're keen to get some idea of the progress that's being made on improving that. Is that going to be something you can bring as part of the annual report, or would that be in September, do you think?
If I may, let me take that away, speak to my team, because obviously there'll be some work to be done there, and with the Chief Constable. But I'm completely in the place that we do need to move forward with this, and I've made the point to this panel before and to the Chief Constable that two-way flow of information, you said we did, is actually the we did is really important, and I think that will be at the crux of some of the Councillor Dawson's concerns as well, because often we know that actually the police and partners have gone out and probably done some really good work, but no one ever knows that they did it, and that in itself is a bit of a wasted opportunity. I feel I do see. Without being able to present, equivocal evidence, I do see a step change. Certainly with the communications from local policing teams, they're a lot more active on social media, saying what they've done. But I certainly need to have the conversation with the Chief Constable as how we can, formulate that more, and I can come back to this panel and give you some reassurance that is in fact being done under sort of due process.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg.
Sorry, I seem to be hogging this particular element. Just another issue with regard to this section. It deals with antisocial behaviour and hate crime and speeding. And I note here that there's something here about cycle crime, which I presume is probably more Cambridge centric, or still the hotter spot. We have a particular issue that kind of affects Peterborough as a whole. It seems that we've become the car cruising capital of, if not East Anglia, then certainly the country. And I think part of that is due to that maybe other forces have been more robust in their response to that kind of activity. We over the summer months we have regularly meets of over 500 cars that this isn't local people just meeting up. This is people coming from across the country because they feel that they are able to act with impunity. We've got so that they meet up. They've got their pops and bangs till 10 o'clock at night, keeping literally hundreds of residents awake. And then they decamp to industrial estates where they then do some street racing and drifting around the car parks. And you know, at these events there's probably in excess of 100 to 200, and the situation has got out of control. It has got out of the police's control. I was present at one of these events where police officers arrived in one of the vans, and they were pelted with golf balls, and they had to withdraw because of that. I don't want to see that happening of our police officers, and I'm sure you don't either. It seems to me that this issue has been put onto the neighbourhood policing teams. I'm not entirely sure that that's the appropriate way of dealing with it. We've got this is squarely a road traffic situation. You know, officers of those units have got specialised knowledge to be able to deal with the common use issues around these cars, and maybe that the neighbourhood policing teams, and I think actually that it's got to a point where it needs to be almost a major operation that needs to be able to tackle and break up these kind of events. We've got residents being kept awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, with the squealing of the tyres, the burning rubber. In the summer, whether you've got your windows open, the smell of burning rubber from these events, the amount of rubber that's left on the ground in this industrial estate after the events is just breathtaking to see. And it just seems that we've had a senior police officer say, well, this is happening on a private road, almost as a reason for why nothing has been done about it. It's not a private road, it's a public road. The car park in the middle of the road where the racing is done is private, yes, but the road where they're doing the racing is a public road. And something needs to be done about this. So whilst I guess that there is an issue of cycle crime in the county, and that's why it's there in your list of priorities, I do think this is something that is this is affecting literally hundreds of our residents, and it's created this magnet from across. Not just Cambridgeshire, but Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, Lincolnshire, Norfolk. These people are coming, from miles apart to come there because they know that they can race with impunity in our county. And I, for one, do not want to see that happening. I think, we shouldn't be seen as a soft target. We shouldn't be having members of the public kept to 2 o'clock in the morning, and also those people that are on the roads driving their cars in a normal way are in danger of running into these idiots racing around our roundabouts. So I would like to see something of a priority being placed on tackling that issue. I believe that there's a request from Peterborough City Council coming to yourself to work with the Chief Constable to put a report together that should be coming short with, so you've got a heads up.
Yeah, I've already had the heads up as it happens, so I am aware of that. Listen, firstly, you mentioned the bike crime or the cycle crime. This isn't about priorities. I'm not saying that that's more important than any of the other. And actually, I'll come back to what we've just been talking about, and that's the community safety partnerships, because they can prioritise, because you've got one in Peterborough, you've got one in Huntingdonshire, East Cambs, South Cambs, and this is exactly what it's about, tackling those local issues. And this isn't, chucking the ball somewhere else. The police are statutory partners and sit round that table. But even with car cruising, once again, it's very rarely just a policing issue. We've seen some pretty good stuff going by the local authority with the barriers being put up. Some of the dispersal orders and prevention orders local authorities can apply for, and or policing. But what needs to happen, they need to come together in a proper problem-solving group and solve the problem. I can hold the constabulary to account in relation to this, and I can convene partners. But for me, the CSPs, or the Safer Peterborough Partnership, are well placed. They do have a group looking at this at the moment. But I am very much aware that the car cruising, Peterborough is particularly hard hit, but it's not just Peterborough. Had it in South Camden, Sutton area as well. Very much aware of it, and I'm very, very happy to help where I can with sort of convening powers and holding the police to account. But as I say, once again, this has got to be a multi-agency joined up approach in relation to resolving it. I thought it might come up. I mean, I have a brief here, but I'm not going to go through that now. I recognise the issue to our local residents, and it is an issue that we will be, and I'll be holding the chief and partners to account for through those other mechanisms, i.e. the CSPs.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other questions on Communities First, or moving on to crime prevention? Which we've already touched on in some degree. The ethical policing and robust enforcement. So, just looking forward to the next, well, particularly to the September meeting. Then, I mean, I think we've kind of surfaced some of the key areas of interest around CSPs and the constabulary's communication, and on the criminal justice. I think obviously we'd like to see where you're at with progress on trying to integrate all of the strands of criminal justice to make that more effective, and I'm sure Councillor Sharp will provide you some guidance on questions and areas to focus on that. Do members have any other observational questions on this? Okay, so you're happy to... Oh, yeah. Councillor Lynn.
Of all the things that we've spoke about today and everything, like Wisbech in particularly and Fenland, I've seen massive improvements. We have seen a lot of improvements. We have seen work that are going on, and a lot of the I think a lot of the reason for this is we have created a good rapport with the neighbourhood policing teams, and we are feeding back to them. I get emails regularly from Andy Morris, who's he's the chief of the neighbourhood policing teams, and anything that is coming to us, I'll send it to him, and he adds that on. So with that, I would say you need to be building that sort of relationship with the teams, and discussing this with the safety partnerships, and sort of building that rapport, because our big issues was antisocial behaviour, and we've got a lot of work going on around that. So I think it's, you know, I'm quite happy. I haven't really got a lot to hold the police account for in our area at this point in time, because we are seeing improvement. So it's difficult for me to sit here and hold the PCC to account for things at the moment. So, but what I would say is the 101 system is the biggest hold-up I think that we have in our communities, and I think if we can get improvement in that area, I think we'll see a massive improvement in the way our communities are seeing the police. So I just wanted to add that in, Ed, if that's okay.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, Councillor Ferguson.
Just wanted to echo that from the other side of the county, in Huntingdonshire as well. We're having a very similar pattern, albeit starting, I think, probably the same for Andrew, from a very low bar, but I think it's been noticed, the improvement. So thank you very much for that.
Right, so is the panel happy to note this report? No further questions? Okay, thank you. So that concludes the meeting that needs your presence, Commissioner. So thank you very much indeed, and to your staff. We look forward to seeing you in July.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, panel, for your continued support. And yes, back in July. Have a good afternoon.
So members, we just have one final item, which is just to confirm dates and agenda content for the next few meetings. We are waiting for a date for member training. Obviously, we don't yet know who is going to be on the panel after the elections, so how we structure changing the training will depend a bit on that. But I've suggested that we have the initial sort of 2 or 3 hours or so would be focused on new members, so as not to bore members who have been here for a long time, and then we do some sort of agenda planning in the afternoon and just something that's a bit more focused on what we're trying to achieve, and also an opportunity to network and potentially meet the new members. So we'll advertise. We'll share the date for that once we have it in September. But our next meeting is the 20th of July, which will be the AGM. So that's the primarily focused on the OPCC annual report and our own report. And then the next meeting after that will be the 14th of September. So hopefully most of you will be at those meetings. I look forward to seeing them. But if not, then thank you very much for your contribution to meetings to date. So unless there's any questions or comments, then I draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much indeed.